There are marriages that begin with celebration and applause, and there are others that begin quietly, with promises spoken softly and sacrifices made in private. Arielle Johnson's marriage to Kang Min-jae belonged to the second kind. When Arielle first met Min-jae, he was not the billionaire the world would later fear and admire. He was a driven man with tired eyes, sharp ambition, and a future that existed only in spreadsheets, late-night calls, and dreams too heavy to sleep beside. Arielle met him during those restless years, when hope mattered more than status and belief meant everything. She believed in him without conditions. Their love did not unfold in dramatic gestures. It grew in shared meals eaten cold because work ran late, in quiet hugs at midnight when exhaustion replaced words, and in the steady way Arielle reminded Min-jae who he was whenever doubt crept into his voice. When he spoke of building an empire, she listened as if it were already real. They married without grandeur. No press. No headlines. Just two people promising forever in a modest room filled with sincerity instead of spectacle. Arielle did not need the world to see her as his wife. Being his home was enough. At first, success came slowly. Then suddenly, Min-jae's company rose like a storm no one could stop. Investors chased him. Media praised him. Boardrooms bowed to his presence. Somewhere along the way his world expanded, and Arielle's began to shrink. She watched from the sidelines as his schedule swallowed their time. Dinners were postponed. Conversations shortened. Hugs lingered less. Yet Arielle never complained. She understood pressure. She understood sacrifice. She told herself love meant patience. Publicly, Min-jae became untouchable. Privately, he became distant. At events, his seat was always filled, but never beside her. Arielle was never invited, never introduced, never acknowledged. When she asked once, gently, why he preferred to attend alone, Min-jae brushed it aside with logic and convenience. It was easier, he said. Less complicated. Arielle nodded, even as something quiet broke inside her. She learned to live in the spaces he left behind. She managed the house alone. She memorized the sound of his footsteps returning late at night. She woke early to prepare his coffee, even when he left before sunrise without noticing. Love to Arielle was not loud. It was consistent. But consistency does not protect a heart from loneliness. As rumors began to swirl, whispers of a woman always at his side, Arielle chose silence over confrontation. She saw the photos online. She read the comments. She recognized the way strangers assumed another woman belonged in the place she once held. Min-jae never explained. Never denied. Never corrected the world. And still Arielle waited. There were moments, rare but tender, when Min-jae would pause, wrap his arms around her, and rest his forehead against hers. Those hugs carried apologies he never spoke. In those moments, Arielle remembered why she stayed. Why she endured the invisibility. Why she kept choosing love. She believed marriages survived seasons of silence. What Arielle did not know was that silence, when prolonged, becomes a language of its own. One that speaks neglect even when love still exists. On the night everything began to change, Arielle sat alone in their quiet home, her phone resting in her palm. The house felt heavier than usual. Her chest ached, not with anger but with an unfamiliar tiredness. She thought of Min-jae's face, the man she married before the world claimed him. She dialed his number. Once. Twice. No answer. She stared at the screen, wondering when love had become something she had to chase. With a steady breath, she tried again. This time it went straight to silence. Arielle did not cry. She simply held the phone closer, whispering his name like a prayer. Somewhere far away, Min-jae continued his life unaware that the woman who built his foundation was slowly fading into the background of his success. And Arielle, still loving him deeply, still believing in the vows spoken years ago, did not know that this chapter of her life, the quiet one, was nearing its end. Because some loves are not broken by betrayal. They are broken by being forgotten. Fame has a way of rewriting reality, especially when silence allows it to. As Kang Min-jae's name climbed higher in business rankings, his image became carefully curated. Sharp suits, controlled expressions, and a woman frequently by his side who was not his wife. Her name was Yoon Seo-rin. Seo-rin was everything the media adored. Elegant, confident, fluent in multiple languages, and always poised beside Min-jae during press conferences and international meetings. She was introduced as a senior business associate, yet the cameras told a different story. Headlines rarely used her title. Instead, they chose words that sold curiosity: mystery woman, constant companion, the woman behind the billionaire. And slowly the world began to believe a lie. Arielle Johnson first saw Seo-rin's face on her phone screen early one morning. The image was polished and professional. Min-jae stepping out of a luxury car, Seo-rin beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. The caption beneath it was cruel in its simplicity. Is this the real woman in the CEO's life? Arielle stared at the screen longer than she should have. Not because of jealousy but because of recognition. She recognized the space Seo-rin occupied, the space that used to belong to her. She closed the app without commenting, without reacting. Dignity had become her armor. Inside their home, nothing changed. Min-jae continued his routines with mechanical precision. He spoke about work. He mentioned Seo-rin only when necessary, always in professional terms. Never once did he acknowledge the rumors. Never once did he reassure Arielle without being asked. And Arielle never asked. She believed that trust meant not forcing explanations. That love meant giving room even when it hurt. Yet with every passing day, the distance between them became something she could feel in her bones. At social gatherings, Arielle stopped being invited altogether. Her absence went unnoticed by the world, but it weighed heavily on her heart. She was a wife unseen, unheard, and unnamed. Meanwhile, Seo-rin's presence grew louder. There were interviews, charity galas, industry events. Always Seo-rin. Always Min-jae. Always headlines that suggested intimacy where none had been confirmed, yet none denied. Once, late at night, Arielle finally asked. Not accusingly. Not angrily. Just quietly. Do you see the things they write about you? She said, her voice soft as she folded laundry beside him. Min-jae barely looked up from his tablet. It's media nonsense. They think she's your... Arielle paused, choosing her words carefully. They think she's more than a colleague. He sighed, irritation flashing briefly across his face. You know better than to believe that. Arielle nodded. She always nodded. But knowing something and feeling secure in it were not the same. What hurt Arielle most was not Seo-rin's existence, but Min-jae's indifference to the damage his silence caused. Each uncorrected rumor chipped away at her place in his life. Each public appearance without her erased her just a little more. At night, when Min-jae returned home exhausted, Arielle would greet him with the same gentle hug she always offered. She would rest her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of a heart that felt increasingly far away. Those hugs became her lifeline. Sometimes she imagined what the world would think if they saw this version of him, the man who leaned into her touch even if only for a moment. The man who once needed her reassurance more than anyone else's approval. But imagination could not compete with reality. Reality was Seo-rin smiling beside him on screens everywhere. Reality was Arielle learning to swallow her loneliness with grace. One afternoon, Arielle overheard two women at a cafe whispering excitedly about Min-jae's secret romance. She sat just a few tables away, unseen, unrecognized, listening as strangers discussed her husband as if she did not exist. She left without finishing her drink. That night, Arielle stood alone in their bedroom, staring at their wedding photo. The image showed two people full of hope, holding onto each other as if nothing could ever come between them. She touched the glass gently. I'm still here, she whispered, though she wasn't sure who needed to hear it more, Min-jae or herself. What Arielle didn't realize was that while the world had chosen a woman to stand beside Min-jae in public, it was her silence that was slowly pushing her out of his life. And somewhere deep within her heart, a quiet understanding began to form. Love ignored does not disappear. It waits. But it does not wait forever. There are moments when the heart senses something the mind refuses to accept. For Arielle Johnson, that awareness arrived quietly, like a shadow stretching across an ordinary evening. The house was unusually silent that night. Not the peaceful kind of silence that came with rest, but the heavy kind, the kind that pressed against her chest and made breathing feel deliberate. Arielle moved through the room slowly, her steps soft against the floor, as though noise itself might disturb the fragile balance she was holding onto. Min-jae had left early that morning. Another dinner. Another meeting. Another promise to be home before midnight. She told herself not to count the hours. But her body felt wrong. Not dramatic. Not urgent. Just off. A dull ache settled beneath her ribs, spreading in waves she couldn't explain. She sat down, then stood up again, uncertain. Arielle was not someone who panicked easily. She had learned long ago how to endure discomfort quietly. Still, something urged her to reach for her phone. She stared at Min-jae's name on the screen for a long moment before pressing call. As it rang, she imagined his voice, brief, distracted, but familiar enough to steady her. She didn't need long conversations. She just needed to hear him. The call went unanswered. Arielle frowned slightly, not in anger but confusion. She tried again. This time, it rang only once before redirecting to silence. She lowered the phone slowly, staring at it as though it had betrayed her. Across the city, Min-jae sat at an elegant dinner table surrounded by industry leaders and flashing lights. Seo-rin sat nearby, discussing numbers and future ventures. His phone vibrated against the table. He glanced at it, saw Arielle's name, and felt a flicker of irritation he did not bother to examine. "I'll call her later," he thought. Without another glance, he silenced the phone. Back in the quiet house, Arielle exhaled and rested her head against the couch. The ache intensified, radiating now, stealing her breath in small pieces. She closed her eyes, grounding herself the way she always did, slow breaths, steady thoughts. She wasn't afraid. She was tired. With trembling fingers, she unlocked her phone again and opened the voicemail option. If she couldn't hear him, she could at least leave something behind. Something simple. Her voice when she spoke was calm. Too calm. "Minj, it's me," she said softly. "I know you're busy. I just wanted to hear your voice tonight. That's all." She paused, swallowing. "I'm proud of you," she added, the words instinctive. "I always have been." She ended the message before emotion could break through. The phone slipped from her hand onto the couch. Arielle leaned back, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths that felt shorter than they should. The room felt colder, though nothing had changed. She thought about the early days, the late nights when Min-jae would call her just to stay awake. How he used to say her name like it anchored him. How he once told her she was the only place he felt safe. A faint smile touched her lips at the memory. She stood, intending to get water, but her knees buckled slightly. She steadied herself against the wall, heart pounding harder now. Still she did not call for help. Arielle had never wanted to be a burden. She reached for her phone again, hesitation flickering in her eyes. Calling him again felt like asking for permission to exist. And yet, she needed him. The third call rang longer this time. At the dinner, Min-jae glanced down again. The vibration annoyed him. He pressed the screen face down, unaware of the finality hidden in that small decision. Arielle lowered the phone slowly. The silence returned, thick, final. She made her way to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, holding a framed photo from their wedding day. Her fingers traced the glass, lingering on Min-jae's smile, the one she hadn't seen in years. "I waited," she whispered, not accusing, just honest. "I always waited." The ache in her chest surged suddenly, sharper now, stealing the air from her lungs. Arielle gasped, clutching the photo to her chest as tears finally slipped free, not from fear but from something closer to acceptance. She did not curse him. She did not resent him. Her last thoughts were filled with love, the kind that remains gentle even when it is neglected. Across the city, laughter echoed around Min-jae as glasses clinked. His phone remained silent on the table. And somewhere between unanswered calls and unspoken words, a life-changing moment passed, unnoticed. Some calls are missed. Others are ignored. And some are never forgiven by time. The night stretched on without mercy, each minute heavier than the last. Arielle Johnson lay curled on the edge of the bed, the wedding photo still pressed against her chest as though it could steady the rhythm of her heart. The room felt unfamiliar now, too large, too quiet, too empty of the life it once held. Her breaths came shallow, uneven. She tried to sit up, but dizziness washed over her, forcing her back down. For the first time that evening, fear flickered through her calm. Not loud. Not panicked. Just a quiet realization that something was very wrong. Arielle reached for her phone again. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it. Min-jae's name filled the screen, familiar and comforting even now. She considered calling once more, then stopped. She had already tried. Love, she believed, should never have to beg. Instead, she opened her messages. Her fingers hovered for a moment before she began to type. Not a plea. Not an accusation. Just truth. "I'm tired tonight," she wrote, then erased it. She tried again. "I love you. I always have." That felt enough. She saved the message but did not send it. Some words, she felt, were meant to exist even if they were never read. The pain surged suddenly, sharper than before. Arielle gasped, the photo slipping from her grasp and landing face down on the bed. She reached for it instinctively, as if losing sight of that memory meant losing him too. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered his name. Min-jae. Not in anger. Not in blame. Just longing. Her thoughts drifted backward, to the small apartment they once shared, to nights spent dreaming aloud about a future they believed would be kinder. She remembered how he used to hug her when things felt impossible, how he once said her arms were the only place he could breathe. That memory wrapped around her now, gentle and warm. Arielle imagined his arms around her, holding her close the way he used to. In her mind, she leaned into that familiar embrace, drawing comfort from a love that had never truly left her heart. If this was the end, she wanted it to be peaceful. Summoning the last of her strength, Arielle reached for her phone one final time, not to call Min-jae but to dial emergency services. Her voice was weak as she gave her address, her words slowing as exhaustion pulled at her. She ended the call and set the phone beside her. Waiting. Her gaze drifted to the ceiling, her thoughts growing softer, slower. She felt strangely calm now, as though her body had already made a decision her mind was only beginning to understand. "I tried," she whispered into the quiet room. "I really did." In another part of the city, the dinner finally ended. Min-jae stood, shaking hands, accepting praise, his mind already moving on to the next obligation. His phone remained untouched in his pocket. He did not know. Back in the bedroom, Arielle's breathing became faint. The room seemed to dim, sounds fading until there was only stillness. She closed her eyes, clutching the edge of the blanket like a child holding on to comfort. Her final thoughts were not of pain. They were of love. Love for the man she married. Love for the life they once dreamed of. Love for the version of him she still believed existed somewhere beneath the ambition and distance. Sirens sounded faintly in the distance, too far, too late. By the time help arrived, Arielle Johnson was already gone. The house stood silent, bearing witness to a goodbye no one heard. The phone lay nearby, screen dark, holding missed calls, unsent messages, and a voicemail that would never receive a response in time. A love story did not end with anger or betrayal that night. It ended with waiting. Waiting for a call that never came. Waiting for a man who would arrive too late. Waiting for a love that deserved to be seen. And as dawn approached, the world continued turning, unaware that somewhere, a woman's heart had stopped loving not because she wanted to, but because it was finally exhausted. Morning arrived without warning, slipping through the glass walls of Kang Min-jae's penthouse in pale shades of gold. It should have been a beautiful day. Instead, it carried a silence that felt wrong, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Min-jae woke to the vibration of his phone. For a moment, irritation flickered through him. He reached for the device, already thinking of meetings and schedules, of profits and deadlines. Then he saw the missed calls, many of them. Some from unknown numbers. Others from Arielle. His chest tightened, though he could not yet name the feeling. Before he could process it, the phone rang again. This time it was his assistant. Her voice, usually efficient and composed, trembled slightly as she spoke. "Sir, there's been an incident at your residence." Min-jae sat up abruptly. "What kind of incident?" There was a pause on the line, the kind that stretches a second into something unbearable. "Your wife," she said carefully. "She was taken to the hospital last night." The words felt distant, unreal. "Why?" Min-jae demanded. "What happened?" Another pause. "She didn't make it." The world stopped. Min-jae stood frozen, the phone slipping from his grasp and clattering onto the floor. For the first time in years he felt something crack open inside him, something fragile and terrifying. "No," he whispered, though no one was there to hear him. "That's not possible." He dressed without awareness, his movements automatic, his mind refusing to accept what his body already knew. The drive home felt endless, the city unfamiliar, every sound too loud, every second too slow. When he arrived, the house was no longer his. Police lights reflected off the walls. Medical staff moved quietly, respectfully. The front door stood open, as though the home itself had been violated. Min-jae stepped inside, his heart pounding violently. He called Arielle's name once, just once, his voice breaking despite himself. There was no answer. The bedroom was exactly as she had left it. The bed untouched. The wedding photo lying face down where it had fallen. He picked it up with trembling hands, turning it over slowly. There they were. Smiling. Hopeful. In love. Something inside Min-jae collapsed. His gaze drifted to the nightstand where her phone lay. He picked it up, noticing the missed calls, 3 attempts. All from her. All ignored by him. His fingers shook as he opened the voicemail app. Her voice filled the room, soft and steady. "I just wanted to hear your voice tonight. That's all. I'm proud of you. I always have been." The message ended. Min-jae sank onto the bed, the weight of reality crushing down on him. He replayed it again. And again. Each time her words cut deeper, not because they accused him, but because they didn't. She had loved him until the end. A sudden realization struck him with brutal force. That call. That unanswered call. It wasn't just a missed moment. It was her last. His chest tightened painfully as memories flooded in, Every dinner he skipped, every event he attended alone, every time he chose convenience over connection. He saw himself through her eyes now, distant, unreachable, absent. "I didn't know," he whispered hoarsely, though the truth was harsher. He had known. He just hadn't cared enough to stop. Min-jae clutched the phone to his chest, his shoulders shaking as grief finally broke through the walls he had built so carefully around himself. The billionaire CEO, feared and admired, sat alone on his bed, undone by a woman who had loved him quietly for years. There were no second chances left. No apologies to offer. No arms to hug him back. Only the echo of a voice he would never hear again. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Min-jae understood something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Success could build empires. But it could not bring back the woman who built him. Grief did not arrive all at once. For Kang Min-jae, it settled slowly, filling the spaces Arielle once occupied until even the air felt heavy with her absence. The house no longer echoed with quiet routines or soft movements. It was still, frozen in the moment she left it. Days passed, though he barely noticed them. Meetings were cancelled. Calls went unanswered. The world that once demanded his attention faded into something distant and unimportant. For the first time in his life, Min-jae had nowhere he needed to be, because the only place that mattered no longer held the person he needed most. One afternoon, driven by a restlessness he could not explain, Min-jae wandered into the small study Arielle had claimed as her own. He had rarely entered the room before. It had always seemed insignificant compared to his expansive office downtown. Now it felt sacred. The shelves were neatly arranged. Books she loved. Old notebooks. A faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, wrapping around him like a memory. He ran his fingers along the desk, stopping when he noticed a small wooden box tucked into the corner. He hesitated before opening it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Each envelope was dated, written in Arielle's careful handwriting. Some were addressed to Min-jae. Others had no name at all. His chest tightened as he lifted the first one, hands trembling. He opened it slowly. "Min-jae, I don't know if I'll ever give this to you, but I wanted to write it anyway." His breath caught. The letter was not long. It spoke of ordinary things, how proud she was of him, how she admired his strength, how she believed in his dreams even when they scared her. There was no resentment in her words. No complaint. Just love, steady and unwavering. He opened another. Then another. Each letter revealed pieces of Arielle he had never fully seen. Her loneliness. Her quiet hope that one day he would look at her the way he once did. Her understanding of the pressure he carried, and her decision to carry it with him even when it hurt. One letter stopped him completely. "If you ever read this and I'm not there," she had written, "please don't blame yourself too harshly. I chose you every day. Even on the days you didn't choose me." Min-jae pressed the letter to his chest, his vision blurring. The realization was unbearable. She had known. She had felt the distance. And still she stayed. He sank to the floor, surrounded by the proof of a love he had taken for granted. In another envelope, Arielle had written about her dreams, small ones she never shared aloud. A community center she wanted to help build. Scholarships she hoped to fund for young women who felt invisible. A life where kindness mattered as much as success. "These were your dreams?" Min-jae whispered brokenly. "And I never asked." The letters were not cries for help. They were acts of love. Hours passed as he read, each word carving regret deeper into his heart. Arielle had never demanded more from him. She had only wanted presence. Acknowledgement. To be seen. He remembered the hugs she offered so freely, the way she held him without asking for anything in return. Those hugs had been her language, her way of loving him when words failed. Now there were only letters. As evening fell, Min-jae gathered the envelopes carefully and placed them back into the box. He did not close it. He could not bring himself to seal her words away again. That night, he stood alone in the bedroom, holding one of her letters, staring at the city lights beyond the window. The empire he built glittered below him, impressive and meaningless. For the first time, Min-jae understood that love was not something you scheduled or postponed. It was something you showed up for. And he hadn't. A quiet vow formed in his heart, not one of redemption because he knew some things could never be fixed, but one of remembrance. Arielle's love would not disappear into silence. He would not allow her to be forgotten the way he once allowed her to be ignored. Her voice would live on. Her dreams would matter. Even if forever had come too late for them. The rumors did not disappear with Arielle's passing. If anything, they grew louder, more careless, feeding on tragedy the way the media always did. Headlines shifted from speculation to judgment, weaving narratives that Min-jae could no longer bring himself to read. For days he avoided everything and everyone. Until Yoon Seo-rin requested to see him. Min-jae almost refused. The thought of her, of the role she had unknowingly played in Arielle's pain, made his chest tighten. But something told him this conversation could no longer be avoided. Truth, he realized too late, demanded courage. They met in a quiet conference room, far from cameras and whispers. Seo-rin arrived dressed simply, her usual confidence replaced with visible discomfort. She bowed her head slightly as Min-jae entered, her expression heavy with respect. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "For Arielle." Hearing his wife's name spoken aloud by someone who had stood so close to him in public sent a sharp ache through Min-jae. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "I need to know," he said finally, his voice low. "What did you think about the rumors?" Seo-rin exhaled slowly, folding her hands together. "I thought you would stop them," she admitted. "I never imagined they would go this far." She explained everything, how she had admired Arielle from a distance, how she knew Min-jae was married and had never crossed a boundary. Their relationship had been built strictly on business, nothing more. "I respected your wife," Seo-rin said firmly. "More than you know. I often wondered why she was never beside you." The words landed like a blow. Seo-rin continued, her voice steady but filled with regret. "I wanted to speak up to correct the narrative. But the industry doesn't listen to women unless men allow it. And you never did." Min-jae closed his eyes. It wasn't just his silence that had hurt Arielle. It was his inaction. "I should have said something," he admitted hoarsely. "I should have protected her." Seo-rin nodded. "Yes, you should have." There was no accusation in her tone. Just truth. She reached into her bag and placed a folded document on the table. "Arielle contacted me once," she added quietly. Min-jae looked up sharply. "She did?" "Yes," Seo-rin said. "She didn't confront me. She thanked me for supporting your work. She said she trusted you." Min-jae's breath caught painfully in his chest. "She never blamed me," Seo-rin continued. "That's why this hurts so much. She was gracious." The room fell silent. In that moment, Min-jae understood the depth of Arielle's love in a way he never had before. Even in pain she had chosen kindness. Even when she felt replaced she had not turned bitter. "I owe her the truth," Min-jae said finally. "You owe her your voice," Seo-rin replied. "The one you withheld while she was alive." That evening Min-jae did something he had never done before. He spoke. In a carefully worded public statement, he addressed the rumors directly. He named Arielle as his wife. He honored her as the woman who stood by him before success ever did. He clarified that Seo-rin had never been anything more than a trusted colleague. The media reacted instantly. But for Min-jae it no longer mattered. The truth was not for them. It was for Arielle. Later that night, Min-jae stood alone by the window, his reflection staring back at him. He whispered an apology into the darkness, knowing it would never reach her ears, but hoping somehow it might reach her spirit. He had failed her when she was alive. He would not fail her again in memory. Regret does not announce itself loudly. It settles in the quiet hours, when there is no one left to impress and nothing left to fix. For Kang Min-jae, regret became his constant companion. After the public statement, the world shifted its attention elsewhere as it always did. Markets rose and fell. New scandals replaced old ones. But inside Min-jae time stood still. He returned to work but not as the man he once was. Meetings felt hollow. Decisions lacked urgency. The power that once defined him now felt strangely irrelevant. Success, he realized, meant nothing when there was no one waiting for him at home. Every evening without fail Min-jae visited Arielle. The cemetery was quiet, tucked away from the city's noise. Her name was carved into stone with a simplicity she would have appreciated. He would stand there for long minutes, sometimes hours, speaking softly as if she were merely resting. "I didn't know how to slow down," he told her one evening, his voice breaking. "I thought providing was enough." The wind stirred gently, brushing past him like a presence he wished were real. He spoke of the letters he read again and again. Of the dreams she never demanded he share. Of the hugs he remembered now with painful clarity, the warmth of them, the safety he had once felt but failed to protect. "I miss you," he admitted, the words heavy with finality. "I miss the way you loved me without conditions." Sometimes he brought flowers. Other times he brought nothing at all, believing his presence mattered more than any offering. He learned to sit in the silence without trying to escape it. Regret, he discovered, had a voice. It whispered in the empty house, in the untouched rooms, in the coffee mug she last used. It spoke through memories he could no longer outrun. Min-jae began to change, not outwardly at first but deeply. He listened more. He spoke less. He noticed the people he once overlooked. Arielle's compassion, once invisible to him, now guided his choices. He funded small initiatives quietly, programs that reflected her dreams, her values. He did not attach his name to them. Recognition no longer mattered. One evening, standing by her grave, Min-jae made a promise aloud. "I will live in a way that honors you," he said softly. "Even if you never see it." He knew he could never undo the past. He could never answer that final call. But he could choose what came next. And what came next would be shaped by love, belated, painful, but real. As he turned to leave, the ache in his chest did not lessen. But something else joined it. Resolve. A quiet understanding that forever did not always mean together in life. Sometimes forever meant remembering. Promises made too late still carry weight, especially when they are kept. Kang Min-jae understood this now as he stood before a room filled with quiet anticipation, his hands folded tightly in front of him. This was not a boardroom announcement or a corporate launch. There were no flashing cameras, no applause waiting at the end. This moment was for Arielle. Months had passed since her death, yet her presence remained everywhere, in his thoughts, in the choices he made, in the pauses between his words. Grief had softened into something steadier, something that guided him rather than consumed him. Min-jae cleared his throat and began to speak. "This foundation is named after my wife, Arielle Johnson," he said calmly. She believed deeply in giving people the chance to be seen. The room remained silent, respectful. The foundation reflected her dreams. Educational support for young women, community programs for those who felt invisible, and spaces built on kindness rather than prestige. Every detail was inspired by the letters she never expected him to read. As Min-jae spoke, he imagined Arielle standing quietly at the back of the room, smiling gently, proud not of him, but of the impact. After the event, he returned home alone. He no longer feared the silence there. He had learned to live with it, to let it remind him of what mattered. He placed one of Arielle's letters back into the wooden box, then added something new. A promise, written in his own hand. "I will live honestly. I will speak your name. I will choose presence over pride." He sealed the box carefully, not to hide it but to preserve it. That evening Min-jae visited Arielle once more. Standing beneath the fading sky, he spoke quietly as he always did. "I kept my word," he told her. "Your love didn't disappear. It became something larger." He stood there longer than usual, feeling the calm settle around him. He understood now that love did not end with loss. It transformed. It lingered in actions, in choices, in legacies built with care. As he turned away, Min-jae knew something with certainty. Arielle was not gone from his life. She was woven into it, forever. Time had a way of softening grief, not erasing it. Kang Min-jae had learned this slowly, painfully, over months that felt like years. Yet even in the quiet routines of his life, Arielle's presence remained a constant, guiding him in ways he could never have imagined. The world had moved on. Headlines no longer whispered about Seo-rin or the rumors that once clouded his life. The markets continued to rise and fall, and meetings continued without pause. But Min-jae no longer measured his life in numbers, deals, or accolades. He measured it in memory, in legacy, in the quiet ways love endured even when the loved one could no longer be seen. Every morning he visited Arielle's favorite cafe, not for coffee, but to remember the small joys she had cherished. He walked past the park where they once dreamed aloud about a future together, holding tight to the hope that her spirit lingered there. Her letters remained carefully preserved, read again and again, not to mourn but to keep her voice alive. The foundation in her name flourished. Scholarships were awarded. Community programs thrived. And Min-jae, once a man driven solely by ambition, had become a man driven by love remembered. He often stood alone at the cemetery, speaking to her quietly as if she could hear him. "You taught me what it means to truly see someone," he would say. "I will live in a way that honors you always." People who saw him in public noted a difference. His eyes carried warmth instead of calculation. His smile softened the way it had once done only for her. And though he never remarried, he did not live in loneliness. He lived in reflection, in gratitude, in quiet devotion, the only kind of forever he could now give. At night, Min-jae often held the wedding photo close to his heart, tracing her face with reverence. He whispered the apologies he had never spoken aloud and the love he had always carried. In those moments, the distance between life and memory dissolved. He could almost feel her hug him, gentle and forgiving the way she always had. Friends asked him why he remained unmarried, why he never sought companionship again. He would only smile faintly and say, "Some loves are meant to last forever, even if they don't last together." In his quiet home, the rooms that once felt empty now felt sacred. Each object, each memory, each letter became a testament to a life lived with love so profound it could not be forgotten. Arielle's laughter, her patience, her unwavering devotion, all of it lived on through him. And in the heart of the man who had once ignored calls, overlooked hugs and dismissed silent love, a transformation had taken place. He had learned the hardest lesson of all, that the people who love us most may not always demand attention, but their love shapes us eternally. Min-jae looked out at the city skyline one evening, the lights glittering like stars scattered across the earth. He breathed deeply and whispered her name softly, a promise renewed. "Forever," he said, "is remembering you." And in that act of remembrance Arielle lived on, not as a shadow of the past, but as the guiding light of every choice, every day and every heartbeat that remained.